This is Lions on Tap, a weekly look inside the Lions' Den, presented by Coors Light, the chilled choice and official beer of the BC Lions. Highlights, interviews, and a look ahead to this week's game. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Baker, Nick Kowalski, and the voice of your BC Lions, Bob the Moj Marjanovic.
Welcome to another edition of BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW, presentation of Coors Light. It's the Moj, Bob Marjanovic, along with Matt Baker and Nick Kowalski from the Lions social media and media relations team, joining us here tonight at Kennedy's Sports Pub, 88th Avenue and Scott Road in Delta. Best wings in Delta. Sue, the manager here, is making us feel extremely welcome. And Matt Baker, this is your haunt, North Delta. How many nights did you spend out here at Kennedy's Pub as a youth?
Oh, who remembers? It's been I've been in here a few times. Always loved it.
I bet.
You're right about the wings.
Best wings. Telling you right here, Kennedy's Sports Pub.
You're right. Shout out to Superfan Dave for providing our set tonight. Those watching this later can check it out, but we got a pretty good shrine here.
I'm telling you,
some
of the stuff that he has going on here, it's just amazing. He's got game programs from like 1950s and 60s. He's got all sorts of memorabilia.
Autographed pictures, Norm Fieldgate.
I think he said, 28 Grey Cups or something?
28,
like that?
yeah.
So thank you again for all of that. Special show tonight, Andrew Peirson will stop by, BC Lions offensive lineman / tight end. Can we call him a tight end now with one catch for 12 yards?
Yeah, Travis Kelce Jr. they're calling him now after last week. Yeah.
Coach Rick
George Kittle.
Coach Rick Campbell saying that he's going to have a number in the 80s pretty soon. But we will talk to Andrew Peirson in the second and third segments of our show. Of course, the final segment will feature Nick Kowalski's world-famous trivia. But first, let's recap the game that was. Going to Winnipeg, knock off a depleted Bombers squad by a score of 26-24. Just your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, Nick and I have kicked this around this week with our various content pieces that we're running. Always good to come out of there with a win. The Bombers are dealing with injuries. They're adjusting after some off-season departures, salary cap. They had some decisions to make. Huge result, having a 4-point cushion on Winnipeg at this juncture with a win in the series under our belts, under the team's belt. You can't beat that. There's some things they're going to fix, and Coach Rick has talked about it. Protecting leads, maybe a bit of an issue. You go back to Toronto, week 1, had a 2-touchdown lead, couldn't hold it, but never complain about coming out of there with a win.
I think finishing too.
Yeah.
Squad settled for field goals instead of touchdowns at some points, but Nick Kowalski, you look at that game, it was kind of like the Calgary game the week before. It was one of those games that you never really saw a team gain momentum. It was just kind of back and forth, just kind of like, like I said the week before, like two heavyweights just kind of in a slugfest.
I mean, when it's 24-23 though for Winnipeg, and there's 5 minutes to go, and that stadium's getting loud, they're singing "Sweet Caroline" like they always do, and the whole stadium feels like it's shaking. I felt like we've seen the story before, where ultimately it's second and long, then it's third and long, and they don't convert. But I mean, Alex Hollins with another deep bomb, Stanley Berryhill coming big on that drive, and then Sean White with the 42-yarder to ultimately get the game-winning points. That's where it was different for me.
Another big night for McInnes, too.
Yeah, Alexander Hollins, 7 catches, 231 yards, 2 touchdown receptions, plus that big catch on that final drive to seal the deal. And the Lions didn't even score on that drive, and that was our Northwest Tank Lions drive of the game, right? Because it was so critical to maintain possession and run out the clock. But here's one thing that kind of flew under the radar for me. And that was a catch by Berryhill on 2nd and 10 on the drive in which Sean White kicked the field goal to go up 26-24. In that drive, if you remember the play previous, the Lions had to call a timeout because Alexander Berryhill was not in the proper alignment. Alexander Hollins actually lost his you-know-what. He was yelling at him, screaming at Berryhill, and Vernon Adams Jr. kind of came over and grabbed Alex and kind of shoved him over to the huddle and got him out of there before it was an embarrassing situation. But the very next play, Stanley Berryhill makes that catch, and he jumps over the video board and then jumps back over. To me, that showed you a little bit of the character that the kid has to make that mistake, and then in the very next play, probably playing one of the biggest plays of the game.
Another aspect of this game that I noticed upon rewatching it is a shout-out Jordan Maximic, because they've hit that same play for 2 touchdowns this year, the Hollins second touchdown. It's the exact same play they ran against Toronto where Justin McInnes scores, but they flipped it and ran it out of a different bunch. And Hollins is pretty much run straight. McInnes goes underneath him, and VA is just reading the safety. In Toronto, the safety goes deep. Hollins VA hits McInnes underneath, but this time Brandon Alexander is kind of late to reacting to it, so VA just gives Hollins a jump ball or just run as fast as you can and go get the ball in the end zone and converted.
It's the Moj, Bob Marjanovic, along with Matt Baker and Nick Kowalski from the BC Lions. We're Kennedy Sports Pub, 88th and 88th Avenue, Scott Road in Delta. The best wings in Delta at Kennedy Sports Pub. Here's something else that you kind of, again, I don't know if it flies under the radar, but I don't think people are talking about it enough. William Stanback and what he brings to this team, right? Yeah. I mean, he hasn't had that 120 or 130-yard game and a couple of touchdowns. But the fact that he has the ability to run the football and get this team into 2nd and 5s rather than 2nd and 9s, and I told Stanback this on the plane coming home. I said, I just love the way he runs. I said, I love the way you run because he runs so hard, so physical. And again, using that baseball analogy that I used, if he was a hitter, he doesn't get cheated at the plate. And it's the same way when he runs. He never gets cheated. He runs hard.
You mentioned no 100 yards yet, but he's improved his total game by game. I think he went from 35 to 69, and he had, 83 on the ground here this time? And you just said it. He earns every one of those yards. Like, he's that classic bruising back that, maybe this team hasn't had since who? Jeremiah Johnson, maybe Andrew Harris, maybe, right?
Yeah. You got to go a ways back.
And we talk about, have to go back into Winnipeg a second time, August 1st. Hopefully going to avoid a return trip in November this time. But you have to go outside in the cold. There's going to be a game in Saskatchewan in October. I know we're looking way down the road here, but that's the type of element this offense is going to need when you get outside at a certain time of year.
One little nugget I told you earlier today is I manually looked this up because I thought it was something that maybe we were lacking. I always think of that 2022 West Final where James Butler had 4 yards rushing, and obviously William Stanback was brought in to make the offense more balanced. So since 2019, the Lions are 0-8 when their leading rusher has fewer than 50 rushing yards. They're 3-2. This is against Winnipeg. They're 3-2 when their leading rusher does get 50 yards. So
it's a big key, and it is. And I think you mentioned as well, Bake, the fact that the Lions are now at 2-1, Winnipeg 0-3. Winnipeg was depleted. They've going through some transition in terms of personnel, and they've had injuries on top of that. But the fact is, you have to beat who's on your schedule, and they wound up beating Winnipeg. And it was a big win because, as we mentioned, 3-0 against 2-1 versus 0-3.
Yeah.
If they lost that game, both teams would have been 1-2. That's a huge swing.
And 2 wins in the division after a loss in Toronto.
And you've also won a game against your arch rival in the best-of-3 series for the season. All right, so the Lions knock off Winnipeg, and now they have the Edmonton Elks coming to BC Place Stadium on Thursday night, a game in which the Edmonton Elks enter it at 0-3, yet at the same time, this is an Edmonton team with a couple of plays here, a couple of plays there. Could have had 1 victory, maybe even 2.
Yeah, I made sure to drop everything on Saturday night to always try to watch the other games when I can, but I was thoroughly entertained by that Edmonton-Toronto game. And, we're talking a lot here about the Lions making plays in the fourth quarter. Comes down to those 4 or 5 plays in the fourth quarter. That's the difference, right? The Elks, a couple of maybe untimely penalties. Think of a roughing the kicker call toward the end when they're trying to get the ball back, and that one didn't end up haunting them, but McLeod Bethel-Thompson, I know a few CFL observers were kind of scratching their heads when they brought him out of retirement, I guess it was, instead of going with the young kid Trey Ford, who, by all accounts, maybe still has a future in this league. But you're just seeing how much more efficient that offense has run with McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And they've been right there. This is going to be a shootout on Thursday, I think.
They lost to Saskatchewan 29-21. They lost to Montreal 23-20. And as you mentioned, the Argo game, a shootout 39-36 Toronto. So Edmonton has been right there. And this is what I think about this Elks team. Chris Jones is feeling the heat. Make no mistake about it. And that's why they went out and got McLeod Bethel-Thompson, because as good as Trey Ford is, and he had an unbelievable training camp, according to what G. Roy Simon, their assistant GM, was telling me, they still had to go with the veteran, right? And that's the thing. They need to win now. And the other thing, too, is let's not forget, they're trying to sell that team to private ownership. A lot easier to sell a team when it's 4-0 rather than when it's 0-4, right? So that's the other thing that comes into play, and why they need to win is because they're trying to move that or sell the team to new ownership. So it's a situation where the Elks right now, they're 0-3, but like I said, they could easily be 1-2 or 2-1.
Lots of weapons on offense too, right? You think of Gino Lewis as this bona fide star receiver, but now they traded for Curly Gittins Jr. from Toronto. He definitely has a chemistry with McLeod Bethel-Thompson, but on the flip side on defense, I still think they're very vulnerable to the big play. We were talking about this last week where you're looking at the Winnipeg depth chart and then the BC depth chart where you're saying Alex Hollins and Justin McInnes and even the guys like Stanley Burial, they should win these battles against these Winnipeg defenders. And I'm saying the same thing this week, right? Like on paper, the BC Lions definitely have the advantage in terms of hitting those big plays, but it obviously comes down to executing, and like you said, you can't take this Elks team lightly.
Well, the other thing too, you talk about big plays. You look at that game against Montreal. Walter Fletcher had a 61-yard reception.
Yeah.
They had another big one. Keon Julian Grant had a 39. I think there were like 2 or 3 big plays in that game that really hurt the Edmonton Elks. So that's the other thing. And Chris Jones has talked about it. I've heard some of his post-game interviews, and they just got to eliminate. It's funny because you hear coaches talk about it all the time. You got to be on the right side of those 4 or 5 big plays in a game. Right now, the Edmonton Elks are not on the right side of those big plays. All right, before we get to break, Thursday night, Edmonton, what do the BC Lions have planned for the faithful, Matt Baker?
Well, it's always a big event. Thursday night football. You can come celebrate the start of your Canada Day long weekend early, but our backyard party is a presentation of Play Now Sports. There's going to be $5 Molson Coors beverages. There's even going to be a build-your-own Caesar bar, I'm told. So I know before the pregame show starts, if you're looking for something to do, that's
you guys
where...
are really trying to get me into trouble, aren't you? Are you trying to get me out there before a game?
Trying to tell our
Build your own Caesar bar.
Every one of these tailgate parties has a new little wrinkle, and that's the one.
I love that wrinkle.
Yeah, all kinds of great food options as well. I've got the food trucks, barbecue, some treats, everything. You want to bring the kids down to the backyard party. There's games to play, face painting, all that. Musical entertainment will include DJ Osho. Usually bring DJ Osho out on our Orange Shirt Day game, but as this game theme is celebrating our colors and the great diversity we have here in Canada, DJ Osho will make a bonus appearance this season. And a special one for us, Pure Later Tackle Hunger. Fans coming can donate cash and non-perishable food items to support local food banks, and do so, you get your picture with the Grey Cup.
All right, great stuff. Coming up in the next segment, BC Lions offensive lineman Andrew Peirson will be our guest. We'll talk to him about, the catch. How do you like that as a 49er fan? The catch. We'll talk to him about the catch. We'll talk to him about the win against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the upcoming game against the Edmonton Elks. You're listening to BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW.
Now, back to more of Lions on Tap, presented by Coors Light. Once again, here are Matt Baker, Nick Kowalski, and Bob the Moj Marjanovic.
This is BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW, coming to you tonight from Kennedy Sports Pub, 88th Avenue and Scott Road in Delta. The best wings in Delta. And a big thank you to Sue and all the folks here at Kennedy Sports Pub. All of this brought to you by the good folks at Coors Light. As the man said, it's the Moj, along with Matt Baker and Nick Kowalski from the BC Lions. Our next guest, I believe, is 66th in CFL receiving as we speak. Offensive lineman / tight end Andrew Peirson is our guest. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to all the fans that showed up. Appreciate everyone.
Hey,
you guys are too nice.
Before we get into, we want to talk a little about your journey and how you got here, because it is an amazing story, but a lot of times when you run plays, special gadget plays in practice, very rarely do you execute them in a game, if you know where I'm going. I know from a defensive side, you might have all these exotic blitzes. You never run them for weeks.
Yeah.
So you run this play where you sneak out and you're kind of a third option as a tight end in the flat.
Oh, fifth option.
Yeah. I don't even, I talked to VA after the game. I think you guys ran that play in practice a couple times. He never even threw to you.
No, we ran it once.
Yeah. So they run it in the game.
Yeah.
VA told us afterwards, he didn't even know it was you. He just went, look, 1, 2, 3, fire.
No, and he was reading my cover defender, too. I could see it in his eyes. Once he knew that Ford was over top of Mackey, he's someone's definitely open. And the funny story about that is that we haven't done any of the tight end, like with me in there, since 2022 when Dave Mackey went down, and we went through this.
Yeah.
So I haven't practiced that, like formation or anything since then. Now with what Katoy went down, they're like, hey, this opens it up, and the Winnipeg defense was allowing us to do some stuff like that. Like Ottawa was running some of that, what we call like the big team kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we saw it on film and it was working, and then we just had to execute it at a high level. So we practiced it once, so I knew my depth and like generally what I was supposed to do. But yeah, like there's no, I joked with the boys. I was like, we could run that play 100 times and it probably still wouldn't be thrown to me. So it was funny how it worked out and everything came through. And when we did it too, it was like, I got the coaching points from Coach Dice where it was like, all right, you're going to go 3 yards deep on the flats. You're going to get to the numbers. If you make it to the numbers, turn around and look. Don't do anything. Just stand there, hoping that a DB would probably cover me, opening up someone else. I got to the numbers. I did, nudge, hit, go, stood on the numbers. Waited, and I was like, I am wide open. There's like, if this doesn't get thrown to me, this is hilarious. And then Coach Dice said, if you get the ball, just run north and south, get the first down. Make sure you're holding the ball, get the first down. And I watched it on tape. I'm like, if I just went to the sideline, if I did literally like, if I like just avoided, but in my head I was like, I'm getting this first down, I'm holding the football, and we're moving the chains. That was like all I was going through my head at the time. But yeah. That gives you a little background on that specific play.
Well, I'll tell you that the interesting thing is, like, calling the game, I didn't even believe it was you. I said, it's an offensive lineman. And then I realized it was you, and I'm like,
I know.
He caught the ball. And I'm sure, Nick, you're probably on the sidelines like, is that Peirson catching a football? It's not Hollins or, anybody else, like a legitimate receiver, as they say. But that was, it was quite the play. And, like, again, the thing that made it, I think, was just VA saying didn't even know that it was you. He threw to the spot.
And one of the funniest things that a lot of fans don't know too is a lot of our players didn't even realize that was me. A lot of them thought that was Dave Mackey because Dave's 34.
The numbers.
I'm 54. And we're both white, so I was like running down the field. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Dave," and then they were like, "No, that was Peirson." So I've been giving the gears to Dave Mackey too recently, like, hey, me and you, man, like we're two peas in a pot.
I had before we delve into more of your journey, I had immediate flashbacks. Remember Jovan Olafioye scored the touchdown at Old Taylor Field in 2016. I'm like, go, get in there.
Well, I'll go even further than that. If you remember Big Ty Williams.
Yeah,
the defensive lineman, Tyrone Williams, I just looked it up. He had 3 catches for 3 touchdowns over the span of 5 years as a BC Lion. So he was down in goal. Brent Johnson, I think, was used in goal line sometimes too, and I think he might have caught one as well.
That's right, yeah.
There's still hope for him. Maybe even getting 6 one of these days. Chip and release.
Just to, I know people want to talk about this the whole time, and I told the O-line too, is that the play's awesome. I was asked to do something. I executed, got the first down. But I personally am way happier about the other 15 plays in that formation that we were running, like mid-zone, inside zone, play action, all those things. Executing those plays, what I'm there to do, because I'm not there to, let's be real, I'm not there to catch the football. I'm there to run the ball when it's called, play action, all these other things. And to do that at a high level against like players like Willie Jefferson, those players, that is what made me walking away from that game. The catch is cool. The pictures are awesome. The fans' reaction. I've been playing football for a while now, and everyone's laughing and clapping and all that. That's awesome. But like for me, intrinsically, going out and being asked to do this big team formation and blocking on the edge, that's what made me happy when I watched that film. So that
and
less sexy kind of talk there, but I think getting the win, getting the first down on that specific play, and then being able to entrusted to execute when I was at the tight end position on the run block and play action, that's personally what really made me happy after the game.
Well, you have sorry, Biggs, you have an amazing story in the sense that you came out of Gannon College, which is in Erie, Pennsylvania.
That is correct. Very famous.
You weren't drafted by a CFL team. You were just basically like a walk-on free agent.
Yes,
you
that's
made the
correct.
team.
Yeah.
And here you are, still playing, what is this, year number 4 or 5?
6.
6, yeah.
6. You've been around. It's been that long.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's a really cool story. And take us back to growing up in Kingston, Ontario, home of Dougie Gilmore, Don Cherry.
Oh, how long do you have? We can keep listening.
Brent Johnson.
Kingston, Ontario. I love it.
How did you get involved in football?
So I grew up in a very athletic family. Like, I played everything. I even did competitive swimming where I wear a swimming cap that said "Eat my bubbles" on the back. Like, I did everything. And I was playing hockey at a competitive level. My old man played hockey. But what kind of happens, as you can see my physique, is that as I got older, I started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I started getting worse and worse and worse at hockey. I was playing at a high level, and then I started going from AA to single A, and I was like, I don't really have a future here. So around grade 7, grade 8, I started playing football along with rugby, wrestling, and I started playing these competitive sports where I was like, hey, I love this. I love the aspect of football where there's a position for every body type on the field. In high school, Holy Cross, same high school as Brent Johnson and Tim Cronk, and Mike McCullough was there for a little bit too. Like, a lot of cool big names went to the high school. So I always had these, figures that I saw that made it from my high school. Oh. So I always I had dinner with Brent Johnson in the off season. I told him, I was like, man, I walked by that, the little the showcase they have where they have the gloves and the football and stuff like that. I looked at that and said, hey, here's a guy that was gifted but worked his tail off. And that was kind of instilled in me at a young age. So I just kept working and working and working. I was given an opportunity to get a scholarship to go down to Pennsylvania where I played my college football. And I was like, I wasn't anything special, but all I did was just keep chopping wood. Like, that was kind of my story. If I had to narrate that, it was just that I kept just keeping a positive attitude and just keep working and working and working. And then 2018, when it was my draft year, I had a draft party similar to like this, where it was like we're watching the TV and everything's happening. And then, we go 1 through 69 and no name called. And I was like, well, in my head, I was like, hey, I did everything I could. I controlled what I controlled, and my name never got called. I felt okay with that at the time because I was like, hey, I tried my best, and that's all I could do. And then 2 days later, my agent calls me and said, hey, Wally Buono, G. Roy Simon wants you to come out. But I looked at the roster and I said, geez, we drafted Peter Godber in the first round, David Neville, and they have like this, if you looked at the offense line of paper, it was stacked with veteran guys. So I was like, hey, I left most of my stuff down in Erie, Pennsylvania, because I was like, hey, this is probably, I'm going to try my best. But at the same time, like, the writing's kind of on the wall. And I went there with a good attitude, and I ended up making a practice roster. 2 injuries happened to center. I got in, made to the playoffs, and been able just to stick around long enough that this year's happened.
And you had quite the time getting to Kamloops. You and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of planes, trains, and automobiles. What? That was. Tell the listeners what happened there.
Yeah, so it was because the time frame from when Canadians get drafted to training camp is already compact. Now subtract 2 or 3 days, and I'm on Erie, Pennsylvania. I think I had like 5 days to get to Kingston, then get to Kingston to Toronto, Toronto to Vancouver, Vancouver to Kamloops. So I literally packed up my stuff, said, hey, boys, I'm going up here. I'll see you in 3 weeks pretty much. Like, that's kind of like I thought was going to happen. And then so I packed up my stuff, went to Kingston. I had 3 days to get ready, or 4 days. And then Neil McAvoy was head of what Tyler does now. He's
the travel guy.
Yeah, she's the travel.
A lot more than that, but he was the one responsible
at the time, and I didn't know that. So I was just like, Neil's my guy I got to talk to. So Neil said, all right, you're going to get on this train from Kingston to Toronto, jump on a flight, and then go from there. So I get on the train, and we're on our way, and then all of a sudden it comes to a screeching stop. And I'm like, what's going on? And unfortunately, someone jumped in front of the train. And it was delayed 6 hours, and I'm nobody special, and I'm calling up Neil McAvoy like, hey, man, like, I'm not making this flight. Like, I am so sorry right now. And he's like, no problem. You can get a later flight. I end up flying out at like 12. I landed at like 5. I was up at 7 o'clock the next day for like physicals and everything. I remember them taking my blood pressure like the next day.
Little high.
And I'm like, yeah, like, I'm sorry. This is not going to be an accurate reading right now. But it was, it's all part of the journey. You just, it's one of those stories you just keep like in the back of your pocket. Because at the time I'm like calling Neil, and I was like, I'm going to be released before I even get to training camp. That was kind of what's going through my head.
You talk about that journey coming in from 2018 and all the way to 2024. You've been through the on-field growth. You've been seeing the off-field growth. I know you do a ton of community work with all the programs we do. What are some of the highlight moments that you think that you look back on throughout these 6 years?
Just off the top of my head, in 2018, when I went from practice roster to active, and then we end up playing. We won the first 4 games. We lost one. Then we had the crossover to Hamilton, and that was the first time that I was able to go back to Ontario and play. So I had about 50 of like my friends, both in Erie, Kingston. They showed up in orange, like Hunter,
I remember that
Hunter jumpsuits, and like they brought buses. And I remember we didn't play well. We don't need to talk about that. But I remember like sitting on the field after, and everyone swarmed me, and they're all so happy. But I am just distraught. Like Travis Lulay just told me he's retiring. There's a ton of emotion going through my head, and I had to step back and go like, this is what it's all about. You work so hard, and you surround yourself with so many great people that like support you and love you, whether what happens on and off the field. Like that was a huge moment for me. And then I think it's just it's nothing really fun to, like, that's a fun story. But the other things is just like the little things that we do as offensive linemen, like breaking bread with the boys, or you go out to eat and, you know, guys get like the chocolate cake, like those little moments, those are what like always stick with me. And you often hear about that when people retire, like, or forced out of the game. Like, what are you going to miss most? It's the little times when you go out to, you know, eat, or you meet up at a buddy's house and then you go to the beach and you're just having good times with good people that, like, you know, you do all this work on the field, you grind together, you have injuries, there's these emotions that go over the place, but then when you step back and just realize that you're good people and have fun outside of it, those are the things that I remember.
It's funny you mention that because you mentioned breaking bread with the offensive lineman. If you recall, last year we had that group we took you to Simba's and Burger,
that's what we're talking about.
I went there with Solomon Elamimian this week, right? And Solly said, the biggest thing I miss, he goes, is that camaraderie.
Yeah,
right?
so
and that's the big thing that, you know, all the players talk about.
Yeah, and obviously we can talk about, like, you know, the catch and all these things. Like, those are obviously core moments, but the things that, like, intrinsically that I love about the group that we have and we've been able to keep for a long time now is that we have so much enjoyment off the field as well.
Very quickly, before we let you go, as we wrap up the journey part, you were in Gannon University, Erie, Pennsylvania, the same time some guy named McDavid was playing for the Erie Otters. Ever cross paths?
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, we've a few times. Him and Connor Brown was also on that team at the time. Wow. So he's also an NHL player. They were at the Otters at the same time. And me being a Canadian, like a couple times, like, you know, we'd be at the same place, and I'd be like going up to him like, hey, I like Connor Brown and McDavid were two different types of people. Brownie was like very outspoken, like, oh yeah, like, you know, and having fun, where McDavid was a lot more to himself, and kind of you could tell that he was like, you know,
his own corporation at that point.
Well, he was just to himself. He's like all hockey, and I was just a Canadian, like down in Pennsylvania, like, hey boys, how's it going? So
all right, we'll take a quick break. More with Lions offensive lineman Andrew Peirson on the other side. Again, we're coming to you from Kennedy Sports Pub, 88th Avenue and Scott Road in Delta, the best wings around. I'm telling you right now, you pop in here, Sue and the crew will take care of you. All right, more with Andrew Peirson. You're listening to BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW.
Now, back to more of Lions on Tap, presented by Coors Light. Once again, here are Matt Baker, Nick Kowalski, and Bob the Moj Marjanovic.
This is BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW, coming to you tonight from Kennedy Sports Pub, 88th Avenue, Scott Road in Delta. And again, Matt Baker claims they have the best wings around. Everybody says the best wings, so we trust them. These are the best wings. In fact, we're going to try some after the show's done. Andrew Peirson of the BC Lions is our guest. We will talk a little bit now about the Winnipeg game and then move on to the upcoming matchup against the Edmonton Elks.
Yeah.
First off, looking at that game, and I mentioned with Matt and Nick, and even talking about it with Julia during the broadcast, kind of similar to the Calgary game. Just, you know, back and forth, no real momentum, you know, big plays, or, you know, this feeling that one team has kind of grabbed the momentum. Kind of a slugfest in a way.
Yeah, I think especially in CFL football too, even if it is like one of those blow-ups, you can't get like in that mind, like where you're like, oh yeah, like we can chill, because at any point it can go back and forth.
Ask Hamilton against Saskatchewan.
Absolutely. Yeah. So But to your point, the whole time we were like, all right, we got to go do it again. We got to do it again. All right, let's do it. And it wasn't like it was all us the whole time. We were making explosive plays when asked. I think one of the things we did really well was do like second and long, second and medium, second and like we were putting ourselves in a situation. You guys were talking about it earlier. Like Stanback was doing a great job. Our offensive line was doing a great job of just moving the chains and getting into second and medium. But that being said, we just had to get better in the red zone. And I think that would have shifted the game a lot more. But we got points when we needed to. But the whole time, it was back and forth, back and forth.
The other thing, too, when you look at that game and that game-winning drive and then Sean White comes down, man, there are times, and you know this, having played football at various levels, when you've got a money kicker, it's just like the best feeling in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Sean White is a money kicker. I mean, anytime you need a clutch kick, he always provides it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's almost like as an offense, too, it's like, all right, we got to get to here. And we know that, like, he has that in him to get his job done. So we just need to do our job to a certain extent that, hey, we need to move the chains, we need to get the chains. Whereas if it wasn't that case, hey, we need to get closer and get closer. So I think it puts us in a perspective like, hey, let's chip away. And if it does, and if it gets to a point where we're not like able to get to that second and medium, or if we don't execute on second down, then we can kick the football and be successul.
Another new addition, Will Stanback, obviously the 83 yards, and I know just from being around him and Dave on the trips and everything, Will, I remember he was talking to Dave about this where he said, you always hear about the grass being greener on the other side and situation you're maybe unhappy with, and he was like, yeah, the grass is greener here. And he's I know he's been coming close to Dave. You're obviously close to Dave, so just what's it been like having Will, and maybe what's one thing you learned about Will that you were surprised to learn?
I think just talking holistically, then I'll go down to Will. I think one of the things that we do really well here in BC is we bring quality people in. And when you bring quality people and good football players, that's when a team does really well. And one of the great things about Will is that he is a fantastic person off the field. Like we've sat together on flights and we've chatted about 100 different things, like TV shows and like little things, maybe a play here, or like where would you like to go out to eat in Montreal, like little things like that. And he's a great guy, and it's translating to the football. And I think you guys talked about it earlier, like how his trajectory is going up every single game. I think that's super normal for a person that's in a new offense that had 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks in training camp, and then we're in the real speed of football, and now we're starting to see him click. I think that's exactly what's happening, and I expect it to keep going forward. I think that's a big thing that we're working on this week, is getting him in the end zone and making sure that his hard work is being paid off with 6 points. He's a great guy, and I could speak to that about like 5 minutes. So.
Well, you know, the other thing, too, everyone always talks about chemistry between a quarterback and receivers. There's a chemistry between a running back and an offensive line.
Absolutely.
Right? Once he starts getting more familiar with how you guys block, is he going to take this guy, or is he going to try to seal him? Or is he going to, take an inside? So once he learns how you guys handle your blocks in certain situations, that even bodes well for the future.
Yeah, and one of the things, like I guess we take for granted here, but like we always go out to eat, like day before a game, or even just on our off days, we always hang out together. Like I said it earlier. And I guess Stanback said, like, hey, we just don't do that in Montreal. I was like, what? Like, I was very confused about that, because we do that with all the different running backs that came here. It's like, hey, to your point, you're one of us. Like, we have to see protection the same way. We have to see run blocking. His cuts, like when I'm blocking someone, I know where he's going to cut based on the reads. Like, I'm seeing it happen. So then I have to make my linebacker adjustments if I'm working the second level accordingly. Like when I was blocking for JB in I think that was 22.
James Butler?
Yeah, James Butler. Like, I knew when I was working the second level, I knew where his cut was going to happen and where the running back or the linebacker was going to be. So your point, like, the more you hang out, the more you start seeing and talking football the same way, you see the same things, that's when it starts clicking. And I think it's going to keep clicking.
Edmonton coming in here, we kicked it around in the intro about how this is a team that probably feels they deserve a better fate through 3 games. And you throw out all the past. I think it's 6 or 7 straight wins against the Elks dating back to 2022, 2021, I guess it was, the Nathan Rourke end of the season start.
Yep.
But throw all that out. What challenges do you see, particularly when studying that Elks defense?
I think they're unpredictable. And that's always very tough when you're like, as a center or as a guard or a tackle, like when you're on the offensive line, like you look for tendencies and you try to see different things that are happening. And so when you have a defense that's not very, let's call it traditional, and they do different things, it's very tough to put yourself in a position to be successful. Kind of talking about what I just talked about with running back reads. Like if you have a defense that puts people into different gaps, like it's tough. You can make you've seen it so far, like someone does a 60-yard run, but then they get blocked up for 3 series. So they do different stuff. They have a lot of athletes. One of the things Jones does well is just gets athletes in there. So you have guys that are kind of freaky kind of builds that run really fast and move well and they're strong. So I think it's just about, trusting our fundamentals and putting ourselves to be in a position to be successful. That will bode well. But that being said, at the same time, you never know what you're going to really get.
Well, it's interesting because everything we hear from the coaching staff when they talk about game planning, we focus on what we do best. And we're not really focusing on what they do, it's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, there's also that issue in terms of scouting an opponent or knowing an opponent.
Yep.
And we talked about it before we went on air. I look at that Edmonton Elks roster. I'm like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like you said, the unknown. So not only is it an unknown in scheme, but it's unknown in personnel because maybe you've gone up against this guy 4 or 5 times in the last 2 years as an offensive lineman. You know what he's going to try in certain situations. You know what his favorite pass rush move is.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, this guy's brand new. Let's see what he's got.
Yeah,
right?
We have 3 games of film on them, right?
Yeah.
So how much of a tendency do they have when you're going against like a Jake Seresna that you have like 5 years on, and you know what kind of moves that he does well? So you need to put yourself in a situation to be successful where you have someone like this that's brand new to the league and is a good athlete and doing things. You have 3 games to study, so you're like, okay, let's see what they do.
Big story today at practice was the fact that Vernon Adams Jr. did not practice.
Yeah.
Talked to Rick Campbell, head coach Rick Campbell, after the workout, and he said that it was better than a 50-50 chance that he would play against the Edmonton Elks. It's a short week. It's an abdominal issue.
Yep.
Jake Dolagala, we saw him today in practice, say he's got to start. How confident do you feel in Jake knowing the offense and his ability to operate this offense?
And talking about the things one thing I love, I talked about the character of this BC Lions team and how we're doing well. The next thing is you've seen it so far when you have someone that goes down, people that step up. Like you've seen it with Stanley Berryhill the third last game. He stepped up and played well. We have confidence in our offense that the next man up mentality when you have someone else stands up. Jake is another person that when he came in here, he meshed and he's breaking bread with the O-line immediately. He's a great human, and he's a pretty freaky athlete, too, when you get the ball in his hands. So he was out there slinging it today, so I feel completely confident. If he goes in, he's going to do his job. The same way that if I get the opportunity to go in again, I'm going to execute. The same thing if Stan gets in, he's going to execute. There's a good feeling that we have the depth to execute at this level, and given the opportunities, that's when we get to see what they are all about. And Jake's been proven that he's been able to do it.
And it's, again, you have to have depth at every position, like you say. What does it say about this coaching staff, this management group? They go out in free agency and they prioritize the quarterback position, even though we know this Lions team has Vernon Adams Jr. More depth is key, like you say.
Yeah, I think you have to. And it's always funny when I've been around for a decent amount of years, not as long as some guys, but it's their job to create competition. And when you create competition, that's when you're pushed to a higher level. Like every year, I've never been given a spot, but I'm there to push the people to further and further get better and better. So I think that's their job, and I think they've done a really good job at doing so. And if anything happens, I feel confident and across the whole board. Anyone, any position right now, there are dogs that are behind them pushing the starters to be better. And if a starter goes down, the next guy, I know that's a dog. He's going to play well.
All right, before we let you go, there's 2 standard answers that most guys give. Okay. One is alignment and execute. The other one is dominate and reset.
Dominate, reset, dominate.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, take those 2 answers out of the equation.
All right.
What do you have to do against Edmonton to be successful? See, now you're stymied.
It's a classic like sports answer, right? You want me to say here's the answer. I think it's to play our style of football. And I think that is that we go out there, we execute the call, and when the call is called, then we just have to go out and do our job, our 112. I think like with my personal situation that happened last week is that, hey, I didn't do anything special. I just did my job. And across the board with you want to talk about the catch or whatever, I mean, you look at every other person on that field, they did their job. The whole offensive line held that protection for 6 seconds, enough time for VA to get the read to me. So I think if we just worry about doing our 112 and execute every play and dominate and reset dominate, I think we're going to have a good time every single game.
Andrew, great stuff. Thanks for stopping by tonight, and best of luck against the Edmonton Elks on Thursday.
Appreciate everyone here.
Andrew Peirson of the BC Lions, offensive lineman / tight end, stopping by to give us his thoughts on the season today, and an outstanding journey as well, as we mentioned, in terms of actually getting to the CFL. Again, we're coming to you from Kennedy Sports Pub, 88th Avenue and Scott Road in Delta, the best wings in the Lower Mainland. And, of course, we invite you to stop by. And a big shout-out tonight to one of our sponsors as well, Derek Thornhill, Stonehouse Realty. Derek, of course, on board with On Tap. Derek could have been a great one in the WLA, except Dave Wilfong ruined his career. Had him playing senior at the age of 12. Oh, it's 14, 15, but who cares? It's a good story. All right, much more coming up in the final segment. We will have Nick Kowalski's world-famous trivia. You're listening to BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW.
This is Lions on Tap, presented by Coors Light, the chill choice and official beer of the BC Lions. Now it's time for Nick Kowalski's world-famous trivia.
Oh, yeah, Kowalski and his world-famous trivia. It's the Moj Bob Marjanovic along with Matt Baker coming to you from Kennedy Sports Pub, 88th and Scott Road in Surrey. All the celebrities are out here tonight. Hart Pandier, play-by-play voice of the BC Lions, doing the Colin Bajabi. He's here. He's meeting with some of the folks. Sloppy Joe Konowalchuk, our good buddy.
Yes.
Winningest manager in the history of Riverway Slow Pitch at .837 winning percentage and 7 titles. He's here tonight. And some guy named Big Al's here tonight. I think his kid's on the panel on Sportsnet. Big Al Bieksa in the house. So it's good
great
stuff.
to meet Al, the pride of Grimsby, Ontario.
Grimsby,
right?
Yep. They're Hamilton people. They're Hamilton Tiger Cat fans.
Yeah, we'll get him converted tonight. We'll get him converted.
All right, Kowalski, what do you got for us tonight?
We're talking 200-yard receiving games from the BC Lions. So it is Hollins became the 20th, or it was the 20th time ever that Hollins got 200 yards, or 20th time it happened in BC Lions franchise history, but he is the 13th BC Lion to ever eclipse 200 receiving yards in another game. So name me the other 12.
Ty Gray, Mervyn Fernandez, Alfred Jackson.
G-Roy did it 3 times.
G-Roy Simon.
Correct.
Mervyn Fernandez.
I read Bake's press release. That's why I know all this.
Yeah, see, he thought about this after I had drafted that up. So,
but you don't have all of them, do you?
How many? Rattled off like 5.
You just named 4. So Tyrone Gray is the franchise record at 270 in a game. Alfred Jackson had 266. You got Mervyn Fernandez. G-Roy did it once.
Yep.
3 times G-Roy did it.
Darren Flutie?
Darren Flutie is correct.
Jason Claremont.
Jason Claremont, where is he? I believe he is... No, he's incorrect.
Mike Trevathan.
Incorrect for
Matt
both.
Clark.
Both incorrect.
We got to go back further than what we've done.
It's an impressive
Jim
list.
Young.
Jim Young is correct.
Thank you. Harry Hull?
Incorrect.
Jim Young, yeah, that's a good one.
You're missing
Brian Burnham.
I was going to say you're missing
Nick Moore.
Those are the 2 recent ones.
Those are the 2.
I was going to say.
Nick Moore was the last before Hollins.
2017, yeah.
I still can't believe 271 is that far away from a single game record.
How many more do we need?
1, 2, 3.
Eric, what was his last name?
89. You got the right name.
I got
happened in 1989.
Eric starts with
Eric.
Because I was doing the research earlier before I knew about this.
This is on the list. 234 yards.
234
You would know this. 89.
89. No, that's a little blurry. Julia would know who it is. He probably threw for 217.
So we got 2.5 more to go. Eric, what's his name, and 2 more, right?
Then you got
Not
another
Richardson.
one. You got another one in 1991.
Not Matt Clark, right? You get
Ray
Alexander.
Okay.
And then you got one down.
Name the year of the other one.
In 1962, it happened.
Norm Fieldgate.
Might have to get these record books out here. The name's got to be in here.
Brown.
Incorrect.
Fieldgate.
Incorrect.
Willie Fleming.
Incorrect.
John Blaine.
Initials. Initials are
Brent Frid. No.
SH. Initials.
SH.
You guys even know the name?
No.
Sonny Homer.
Sonny Homer.
Sonny, not Sonny.
Sonny Homer.
Sonny Homer.
Sonny Homer.
And what was Eric's last name?
Streeter.
Streeter. There it
Eric
is.
Streeter, you got me on that one. All right. That's
Not
it.
bad.
That's it. It's an impressive list. So you got 270 is the franchise record. Alfred Jackson got 266.
Dwayne's asking who won. I think we both just kind of rattled off what we
a team effort.
remember from today.
It's always a team effort. There's no individualism.
Football's a team sport. Yeah.
Collins, the 13th highest total in franchise history.
Great stuff. Well, that's good trivia tonight. Too bad that, like I said, Big put up that press release. Otherwise, I might not have got it.
Great minds think alike, I guess, right? I'm always trying to think of a theme.
Well, very quickly, Steve Daniel, our historian, Steve Daniel, going into the Hall of Fame with someone else we know going in. Can't remember who else is going in.
Who else is going in?
Someone else is going in the media. We can't remember who.
I can't remember his
name. He's in Europe right now. But so I'm on a call with our VP of Marketing, Carolyn Cody, just talking about stuff for this week. Kowalski the door's closed. Kowalski barges in, hands me a sticky note. It says, "Do not look at Steve Daniel's email." I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm on this call. I haven't looked. So Steve had sent us the data of these other ones. But
I asked him individually, and then he CC'd you on the reply.
But
unbeknownst
to him, this is like 10:30. I've got the release drafted for 11 for Hall, but thankfully I didn't have everyone listed in there. But so there you go. There's a little inside the office, behind the scenes
trivia.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, before we get out of here, again, Thursday night, Edmonton Elks. What do the Lions have planned for their fans?
Yeah, once again, backyard tailgate party, 4 o'clock, $5 Molson Coors, build your own Caesar bar. I think our friend Al's sticking around town just to do that. I mentioned the music, DJ Osho. Forgot to mention Scenic Route to Alaska. Rock and roll duo out of Edmonton, I believe. So we've got a couple of music options for the backyard party. Games for the kids, face painting. Did I mention $5 beers? Molson Coors products, build your own Caesars. Pure Later Tackle Hunger, always a special night on the home game calendar. Fans are encouraged to bring non-perishable food items and cash donations to support your local food banks. You look at it, since 2019, Moj, food bank usage is up a staggering amount in Vancouver and across British Columbia. So every little bit, every donation helps. And if you donate, you get your picture with the Grey Cup. And I hear the Grey Cup fan base will be on hand too. So any season ticket holders who have their name on the base, come check it out. Donate, get your picture.
All right, before we get out of here, shout out. You were talking to Sloppy Joe about BC Lions alum. He might be listening at home tonight. Member of the original Lions in 1954, and he's still a Lions fan. Big shout out for Bill Colburn, correct?
Yes, that's it.
Yes,
yeah.
There you go. Big shout out to Big Colburn.
19 games from 54 to 55.
Yeah, all right. So big shout out. Bob Colburn, pardon me.
Yeah.
So big shout out for Bob out there if he's listening. 1954, an original line. All right, that's a wrap for us tonight. Again, a big thank you to everybody at Kennedy's Sports Pub, 88th Avenue and Scott Road. If you're in the neighborhood, check it out. The best wings. Forget Lower Mainland. I'm saying the best wings in BC. Sue, the manager here, she will take care of you. Big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Coors Light. And a big thank you to everybody behind the scenes. Trevor Martins, our executive producer on location tonight here at Kennedy Sports Hub. That is a wrap for us. You know what I'm going to tell you, Big, before we get out here? You want to do it for me? Because you do it pretty well. You used to do this when I was doing the show, and you're the producer. You used to do this all the time.
This is years of my life here. Go out, live life to the fullest, have fun. Go for it on third down. Throw to Andrew Peirson on third down. Go for it. Just do us a favor. Be safe.
That's pretty good. That's almost as good as your Cuthbert impersonation. All right, we're out of here. Big thank you again to everybody at Kennedy Sports Pub. This has been BC Lions on Tap on 980 CKNW.